By lunchtime, the payroll office had revolted. 3 administrators sat in the hallway of the ancient Hydro building, pissed off and waiting for me to arrive. Within a few meters of the door, I could already smell what this was about. It had happened again. A dead thing above the ceiling tiles. The guy I'd replaced as union rep, a custodian named Charles, had told me the story of a dead squirrel the managers refused to believe existed above the payroll office, going so far as to deny the foul stench making everybody sick. They gave in eventually, the previous rep told me on his last day. It was awkward. The custodians, including me, refused to do it. The managers probably didn't want to piss them off. Never piss off a custodian, brother. Or man. He didn't have to tell me. I'd been in elementary school the last time the custodians in Bridal Veil Lake Public Services went on strike. Little 10-year-old me was up to my ankles in trash by the end of the week. But I digress. Charlie had retired, and the ladies of payroll were the union members that needed my help. "We're not going back in there, Hal," Christy said. She'd worked with Hydro since her teenage years, and could retire any time, or take a year off sick with all her banked days. She was also the only one who understood the complexity of the antiquated system Hydro used to pay everyone. In other words, she was bulletproof to the managers, all younger than her. I went to her direct manager next. I was new to the union rep job. I wasn't new to Hydro. I'd been with the company as a training specialist going on 15 years. Basically, I spent most of my day writing instructions and delivering programs to employees. I knew everybody and felt pretty comfortable. "Payroll's in the hallway again," I said, seated opposite the project manager, Jeff, and, surprisingly, Fred, the head custodian. "There's a smell. Again." The two of them exchanged a glance. "Hal," Jeff eventually said, "there's no smell in there, it's..." He looked to Fred, who nodded. "Christy hates me," Fred said with a shrug. "I would never refuse something like that. It's an easy fix. I just don't want to deal with her. She thinks she rules the place, and..." Jeff raised his hand. "It's a conflict of personalities." "And a smell," I added. "There's definitely a smell, Jeff. I smelled it. Everyone can smell it." "It's an old building," Fred said. "Probably a water leak's gone stagnant in the tiles. I sent JJ to look and he couldn't find anything. There's no dead animal." "It really smells like there is." He wasn't wrong about the building, though. It's super old. Nikola Tesla helped design it after he'd finished in Niagara Falls, and turned the lights on in Hamilton. That was in 1898. Bridal Veil Lake got their mini version of hydroelectric AC power the following year. The only older building that I know of is Buckner Collegiate, the high school, which served as a barracks and hospital during the War of 1812. And that building has been renovated and updated so many times, you'd only know its age by the clues in the few remaining fragments still standing. The Westinghouse Power Station, on the other hand, looks like a castle, inside and out. All of the modern equipment looks out of place, and the drop ceilings are comical. Why put cheap garbage overtop on supposedly amazing stone masonry? Maybe to catch all the leaks, and to piss off Christy in payroll, I guessed. "We can replace the tiles, Hal," Jeff said, a little exhausted. "It won't fix Christy." "Does Christy need fixing?" He quickly shook his head. "No, I mean the thing with the custodians. She always seems to have a problem they can't fix fast enough." It wasn't my job to comment or care about his opinion of Christy. "When will the tiles be replaced?" Fred appeared to waken from slumber. "This evening?" "And in the meantime?" The manager sighed. "Payroll can work from home this afternoon." I thanked them and brought the good news to Christy and the others. She didn't seem as happy as her younger colleagues, but didn't comment. They held their breath to retrieve their things and went home. It felt like a victory, until Christy's brief and concerned look on her way out of the giant, ponderous doors to the parking lot. She opened her mouth to say something, but thought better of it, I guess, and smiled and waved at me in farewell. Job done. Or So I thought. The smell persisted. Jeff said Fred was waiting on some replacement tiles. He'd taken out the ones above the door, which were the apparent source of the issue. Yet it still stank like death. Jeff could only shrug. I think he was happy with Christy working from home for a few more days. She could be pushy and authoritative, but I liked her. Plus, she had earned her unofficial leadership role through pure grit. Most of the managers, on the other hand, have nice last names and relatives in high places around town. Jeff's dad served as city manager. Everyone knew Hydro was just the waiting room for a shithead like Jeff. By Friday, the awful odor had spread, moving down the steps to the purchasing department. No argument was required this time. They were all sent home early for the weekend. A bunch of people began wishing the stink would somehow flow their way. Fred viewed the spread as confirmation of his foul water theory. After another rainy day, the leak had overrun whatever cavity it had filled in the ceiling. Gravity, he reasoned, and demonstrated with his hands representing the ceiling for some reason, had pulled the excess water to the ceiling above purchasing. Wouldn't the water have to breach the second floor? I asked. It's an old building, he affirmed for me again. Yes? Water gets into a place, it's going to travel down if it can. He scratched his grizzled beard, and I recognized the beginning of a pointless conversation. See you, Fred. More tiles were ordered, and he'd get JJ up on the roof Monday. Case closed. I'd spent too much time with this issue, and found the need to clock some overtime on Saturday. I didn't mind because I got paid for it. When I rolled into the parking lot around 10 a.m., I was surprised to see Christy's car. The lights were on in payroll. I had a lot to catch up on, so avoided going to visit with her first. She'd come to me, for sure, once she realized I was in. And another tirade about Fred and Jeff and the state of the power station would raise the unasked question. Why not just retire? Around 11, she finally passed by the window of my office. She waved and smiled, but didn't stop to chat, and seemed in an uncharacteristic hurry. Usually, Christy approached everything, quite literally, with quiet resolve and certainty. It was weird to see her nervously wringing her hands. I peeked into the wide hallways as her echoing footsteps ceased by the elevator. She pressed the call button going up. No official reason to be going to the second floor, where a bunch of crap no one knew what to do with was stored. Old equipment and boxes of work orders filled those rooms, and all of it smelled like dirt because some genius thought it'd be cool to carpet over the stone hallways. Rather than rip up the carpets, the next genius decided to relocate the executive offices downtown. After the elevator elevated away, I snuck up the stairs, thinking I'd give her a surprise. She'd be pissed, but not for long. Christy was serious most of the time, and yet not above the odd prank. She'd engineered a jump scare on the other payroll folks last Halloween with a huge remote-controlled tarantula. I stopped at the final step to the second floor when I heard her talking. This is stupid. This is stupid. I should just... Oh God, it's definitely coming from... The rest of her words were lost beneath the heavy chalk of an old tumbler lock. I crouched before I peeked around the edge of the stairwell wall. Christy held a large brass key and braced herself against the room ahead. She held her nose against the back of her hand, and after a moment, I smelled why. The awful smell came from that room. There could be no doubt. Fred's theory about stagnant water flowing from the roof on down through the floors was wrong. Something had died up ahead. It was so bad. I gagged, and the odor filled my mouth with a rancid taste. Despite my extreme revulsion, Christy went in. I tried to call out for her to wait, but the words died in my constricted throat. Silence followed her entry. The urge to leave persisted. Nobody should enter such a room without serious PPE. But I couldn't leave Christy on her own. That would be wrong. I was the rep. So I followed, against every instinct telling me to run. The fear prickling my skin, driving cold sweat through my pores, was about more than a bad smell. There were too many irregularities. Something bad had happened in that room. Christy had activated the flashlight app on her phone. In her other hand, she held a bloodied knife. A yelp escaped between the fingers of my hand as I covered my mouth. Christy turned, and the light blinded me to everything but the knife. "Hal," she whispered, only mildly surprised. "What are you doing up here?" I couldn't answer. I watched the blood drip from the tip of the knife into the dark and smelly carpet. "Hal? Hal?" I started to back away before I decided to run. "What are you doing, Hal?" I bolted. Christy shouted something. I leapt to the first landing of the stairs. I'm not a jogger, but Christy's old and wore heels. The worst shoes imaginable for a murderous pursuit. Her shrieks echoed into the stairwell, chasing me out into the first floor corridor. I needed my phone. The door to my office was closed and locked. I don't remember if I shut it or not, but the handle is always locked. I didn't fuck around with the keys. Christy was coming, slowly, and if she had already killed somebody, even an animal, hopefully an animal, she had one more notch in her belt than I did. I hadn't even been in a fight since I was a kid, and I certainly lost that one. Away from the hallway, toward payroll in fact, I didn't notice the puddle beneath the exposed ceiling tiles. Glass from the office window shattered from the impact of my shoulder as I slipped wildly. "Holy shit, Hal, are you okay?" Fred asked, suddenly there with Jeff. They were walking out of Jeff's office together. Half embedded in the window, I declined to answer. "Why are you running? What the hell is that all over the floor?" "It's blood," I said, completely out of breath from the run and panic. "Christy, she's right behind me. She should have caught up by now." "Jesus, what's going on, Hal?" Jeff stepped carefully around the pool of blood growing steadily beneath a steady drip in the ceiling. He looked where I'd been running. "Is Christy with you?" No, you don't understand," I said, as Fred helped dislodge me from the window. "She's done something awful upstairs, I think." Except that didn't make much sense. Why draw attention to the smell with complaints if she caused the smell in the first place? The blood on the knife had been fresh. Fred and Jeff exchanged a look. "Why are you guys here?" I asked. "Overtime," they said in unison. "Why are you here, Hal?" Jeff asked. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Same reason as you." A moment of awkward silence and cleared throats followed. Christy finally stepped out of the stairwell where she'd been hiding. She still held the knife. "Christy," Jeff said, "what the hell are you doing?" He gestured vaguely at the knife and smirked. Fred appeared more incredulous. "I knew you were crazy." "It's Hal," Christy said. "I caught him on the second floor, going to the room above payroll." "Caught me?" I said. "I followed you there, and you already had that bloody knife. That literally bloody knife. Caught me? I caught you!" I was surprised by my anger, and still scared. It was weird how Fred and Jeff just happened to be there. Christy, too. "Is that true, Christy? Did you go up first?" Jeff had taken on the typical paternalistic manager voice nobody loved. He's younger than all of us. "I did," she admitted. "I wanted to see what the hell stank so bad. Well, there's something up there, all right. I couldn't find out exactly before Hal surprised me." "I was trying to surprise you," I said. "I thought it'd be a funny prank." She stared me down. I looked away. "Hold on," Jeff said. "Fred, didn't you check up there last week when it started smelling again?" Fred's already ruddy skin turned a deeper shade of red. "I was going to send JJ up on Monday, remember?" "Why are you here, Jeff?" Fred tapped his barrel chest. "I have a reason to be here." "Which is?" I asked. Christy chose that moment as some kind of invitation to come closer. I leveled a finger at her. "Don't fucking move." She froze. "Fuck you, Hal." Jeff sighed and looked at Fred. "Which is?" "I bought some tiles for the ceiling," he said. On my own time, with my own damn money. I was gonna replace the tiles now, so none of the custodians had to deal with Christy. And fuck you, Fred, Christy said. I was here to catch up on work, I offered, because the goddamn smell issue took up so much time. We're still waiting for Jeff's reason. He shrugged. And you'll keep waiting. I don't have to explain anything to you. I'm the boss, remember? Christy laughed and mimed a curtsy, waving the knife around too casually for my liking. My liege. This is fucked up, I said. Time to call the police. Whoa, Jeff said. Wait a second. We don't even know what's up there. Christy didn't see anything. I pointed to the knife in her hands. I found it there, Hal. I only picked it up in case there were any lurkers around. She crossed her arms, expertly folding the tip of the knife through the crook of her elbow to avoid cutting herself. And there was, so... Jeff showed some guts and stepped in the path between me and Christy. Just stop. We're probably squabbling over nothing. Let's all take a breath, and go upstairs and see what we're actually dealing with before we execute somebody for murder. He didn't want the police involved. Anything that got in the way of his progress in Daddy's footsteps had to be avoided. Fred chimed in. He's right. Let's just go upstairs and see. Christy tipped the scale completely. Fine. But you leave the knife here. I didn't want to go. There had to be something in our contract excusing workers from walking into possibly criminal circumstances. If I didn't follow the group, however, I felt like I'd be drawing suspicion from the others. Christy seemed to think I was guilty of whatever occurred on the second floor. I knew it wasn't me, and all of us at work on a Saturday was too convenient. Jeff had given no reason for his attendance. Fred had a reason, a fairly plausible one, avoiding Christy, but was a little too quick to agree to go upstairs. Christy had literally been caught with a murder weapon, if indeed a murder had taken place. I want my phone, I said. Sure, Jeff said. Let's get it together. All of us. Christy, the knife? He held out his hand and took a few steps toward her. She chuckled. Fat chance, Nepo baby. The knife slid surprisingly far on the smooth stone floor, with what seemed like a gentle toss by Christy. It sailed across the access to the stairwell, our proposed destination, inviting the guilty party to go and retrieve it. Nobody moved. We hesitated. Why? We all suspected the others. I knew, especially, the chances of something upstairs being fucked up, even if it was a dead animal, were high. I admit I was afraid. They all watched through the open blinds of my office while I retrieved my cell phone. I dropped my keys when I tried to unlock the door, and felt their scrutiny heat up in the corridor. I hadn't done anything. I had nothing to do with the rot on the second floor. Yet, I took a share of the doubt equally. I guess that was fair. As we mounted the steps in stiff pairs, moving slowly, trying to watch each other and up ahead, I wondered how well I knew any of them. Not well enough to be certain they weren't capable of horrible things. Christy's perfume mixed with Jeff's liberal use of Axe body spray. Fred bore a layer of sweat that accentuated a normally subdued body odor. The melange caused a sting in my nostrils, early signs of a headache to come. But I missed the olfactory mixture the second we stepped onto the second floor. The pungent stench of death made us flinch and hesitate. We covered our faces and breathed through our mouths. The dark room exuded silence in addition to dread. I do not want to go in there, I said, mouthing the words through my fingers. Me neither, Fred agreed. Christy kept her thoughts to herself, and I noticed she had allowed us to move ahead while she lingered closest to the exit. It sucks, Jeff agreed, but we need to do this. Do we? I asked. I had my phone ready. He saw it and became alarmed. Please, don't. You're all right about me, okay? I'm, what Christy said. Nepo baby? She reminded him. Jeff grimaced. But I still care about my career and my family. If this is nothing and we call the police, my dad will find out. You know how small Bridal Veil Lake is. Everyone knows everyone. I'll look like a fool if I let something dumb slide. Something I should have been on top of, you know? My dad already thinks I'm a... He let us fill in the blank. A chump? Christy filled in. He's not, Fred intervened. And you know what, Christy? Christy waited calmly for the answer. But Fred balked and wilted the same as Jeff. Enough, he said. I'll look. To their credit, both Fred and Jeff entered the room. I'd gotten closer than I had on my first visit to the second floor. The carpet swished softly beneath their steps. A trail of blood had already been tracked out by Christy from before. I only noticed it then, however, while Fred cursed about the light switch not being beside the door. What are we walking through? Jeff asked. Neither had turned on a flashlight. They searched blindly, an idea that frankly scared the hell out of me. They weren't scared, however, because maybe they already knew what to expect. Sudden illumination painted the horror with clinical tracklight precision. A flood of red dyed the tacky carpets. Swells of blood gathered around Jeff's feet. No, Jeff shouted. I couldn't see him. No, I didn't. Jeff rapidly tapped on the screen of his phone. I reached instinctively for Christy, afraid and forgetting about the bloody knife. She stepped ahead. She held another weapon, an X-Acto blade, extended. Come on, coward, she ordered me. Fred grunted and whimpered inside the room. Jesus Christ, Christy said when she stepped in. She lowered the X-Acto knife and waited. What is it? I asked her. What? She ignored me and continued to watch a still unseen Fred as he labored desperately over something. Stepping onto that, felt like trespassing. I didn't belong there. None of us did. And now that we had, there was no returning to the normal world. Dried onion skins littered the floor by the wall where Fred stood. They crushed and flattened beneath his boots as he desperately attempted to wipe the wall with his hands. Written in blood, his name. Fred. Not Frederick, no surname, just F-R-E-D in large print. Yes, that's right, Jeff said to a 911 operator. Westinghouse. No, Fred rounded on us with wild eyes and red hands. It wasn't. I didn't. His ass splashed in the sodden carpet as he sat down. He saw the strips of onion surrounding him. We were all so stunned, we looked at them more closely, too. Aside from the massive amount of blood and the name on the wall, the crisp bits were the only remaining objects of interest. Christy picked up a piece and squinted. What is it? Put it down, Jeff said, still on the phone. Yes, we will, he said to the operator before addressing us again. Out. Everyone out. Stop touching everything. It's skin, Christy said, ignoring Jeff, letting the paper-thin flesh drift gently to the floor. Someone's been cooking up here. Why did she seem fascinated? I turned away and saw the clump of bloodied hair before the scalp it was attached to. Oh, God. I started vomiting. On my hands and knees, sucking in the stink, knowing its origin. An infinite wretch held me captive. I crawled out into the hallway. I had to get away. One of them had done something awful to a human being. Jeff and Christy followed shortly after. I hardly noticed. Fred remained inside the room until sirens could be heard. Then he sprang from the doorway and darted into the hall. Hold your horses, Christy shouted, stepping into his path. She brandished the X-Acto blade, but to no purpose. Fred clocked her straight between the eyes, and the old lady dropped cold, a bag of bones. Jeff and I made no effort to prevent Fred's escape. I was in no condition to even stand up. Jeff is just a prick. The first constables found us as Christy began to awaken. None of us could explain what had happened, and certainly not what had transpired in the bloody room. So, they told us. Eventually. Someone had been murdered there. That much would be confirmed later when I was taken into custody and questioned. The amount of blood suggested multiple victims, but the human body apparently contains an astonishing amount. Only one person had died there: Charles, the retired custodian, the rep I had replaced. Or so the police assumed. Further investigation discovered Charles was missing long enough that the food in his fridge had spoiled. They never found his remains, but the blood in the room and leaking below belonged to him. No one can lose that much blood and still be alive. He was peeled slowly, a particularly cruel detective told me, trying to get me to admit to killing Charles, I guess. Must have been fucking horrible, watching your skin come off and cook, too. We think they used a lighter. There were bite marks in some of the pieces, Hal. Grotesque stuff. That was my last interview, and then they abruptly told me to leave. Fred had been found. He'd run to the gorge, and hung himself from a tree with his belt a few hours after running from the power station. In his blood, the tip of his finger opened with a sharp stick, he wrote a simple confession on a receipt. I did it. The paper was found in his rotting hand. It had taken the police an embarrassing amount of time to find him. Their excuse was he'd gone to a remote part of the forest, a nature preserve, where there were no maintained paths. Now, do you believe Fred's confession? No? Well, you'll be shocked to know the case effectively closed after his death. Officially, Fred wasn't charged. No trial followed. But the cruel detective I mentioned earlier was pretty candid about the continuance of the investigation. Not bloody likely, he'd said. I actually ran into him by chance at a bar. Not a slim chance either. I visited all the bars after this incident. So did Jeff. I ran into him, too. We drank together for a few days, and then ended up in a fistfight that saw us banned from the Lucky Snail off Tour Hill. He accused me. I accused him. Neither of us could look at each other once we had no choice but to return to Westinghouse. Christy was back before either of us, but didn't seem the same. She chose to gradually retire, winding down her hours while she trained a replacement. When I did see her, which was rare, we didn't speak or make eye contact. Mostly, I sat in my office and drank, watching the door. Fred hadn't done it. Were we really meant to believe he had signed his name in the victim's blood on the wall? Or that the victim had somehow written it before dying? Fred would have then removed the remains, but somehow missed the clumsy accusation. Not bloody likely, I say, like the cruel detective. A lot. To my braced office door. The killer wanders these halls. I'm sure of it. I pee in a bucket because I refuse to go out of my office except to leave the building. I carry a knife. Jeff never got his promotion. I still don't really know why he'd been in the building that Saturday. Pulling some bullshit overtime for the extra money? Or cleaning up his horror show? Maybe both. Fucking psychopath on the public dime. Or maybe not. JJ became the new head custodian and the rep. He never found the tiles Fred had purchased. That's about the state of things now. I wait for the neat bow to end this ordeal, but that's rarely how life works out. Things happen to us. We continue living. The villains get away. We pretend they didn't. There's a room of horrors waiting somewhere for you and everyone. It's only a matter of time before you're shaken out of everyday life by it. The best anyone can hope for is not to be peeled, cooked, and eaten. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward,
And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.